Hey guys, welcome to another episode of As the Leader Grows podcast. I'm like a kid in a freaking candy store right now, or a kid on Christmas morning waiting to run out and see my GI Joe and my football and all the stuff, right? Because I have got my good friend Dr. Morgan Anderson, clinical psychologist, attachment theory expert, host of the Let's Get Vulnerable podcast, over 5 million downloads. And she absolutely slayed my stage at Create this year in Atlanta. I'm talking about attachment styles. Had everybody, can we put this in the show notes? The little QR code thingy?
Oh, absolutely. We'll get the
Oh,
quiz.
we got you. We're going to give you a quiz when we get through with this podcast. I don't care if you're single, if you're in a relationship, or you're in a marriage. We're going to help you move forward in your relationship. Dr. Morgan, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, I'm great. I'm so excited to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, tell everybody a little bit about, I just hit the highlights. Tell everybody a little bit about who you are, this passion about helping people understand what kind of attachment style they have and the different processes in moving towards being, as we would call, a secure attachment.
Yeah, I am a clinical psychologist and I experienced a lot of childhood trauma, and it really led me to this place of I need to figure out how to have a healthy relationship. And specifically for me, I was my second year in getting my doctorate in clinical psychology, and I was in a relationship with a narcissist.
Mm.
And I really hit rock bottom at that moment of I can't keep doing this, right? Of being in these kinds of relationships that are hurting me. So that's when I dedicated my career to understanding attachment theory, to understanding how to have healthy relationships. And it changed everything for me. And then I started to help my clients as well. And eventually I said, wow, I need to help as many people as possible understand their attachment style and then help them become securely attached,
Mm.
because I know that no matter what trauma you've experienced, what you've been through in your life, I know that you can become securely attached.
So out of this, it's almost like ministry. It's like a calling for you. Your burden to help people understand where they are with their attachment style, and then how to get from where they are to having a secure attachment style so they can have a healthy relationship, was birthed out of what you had to go through in order to help other people.
Absolutely.
Walk me through like the process of you, because you said just a minute ago, I was in a relationship with a narcissist. Well, I've done, obviously, in the last several years, 2.5, 3 years, I've had a few relationships, one long term. And the long term relationship I was in for about a year, year and a half was with someone who was a narcissist. And I didn't even realize it until afterwards. When you realized that and you realized why you were attracted to and stayed in that relationship, walk me through that process.
A lot of people who are drawn to helping professions and helping others, we have so much empathy and we're so good at serving other people and being attuned to other people's needs, right? And that can make us more susceptible to that kind of relationship. And ultimately, I had so much fear of abandonment because I had lost my mom at a young age and had all kinds of other relational trauma I'd experienced. My fear of abandonment was just so strong that I would have done anything just to make a relationship work,
Mm.
no matter how painful it was. And for me, it took a near death experience of going, wow, I don't think I'm going to be alive if I stay in this relationship. It really took that to kind of shake myself and go, you can't stay in this anymore. Right. And then I started my healing journey and learning how to not have fear of abandonment, how to choose myself, how to heal my self-worth and start attracting healthy, emotionally available partners.
And do you remember a time in that season of your life where you kind of had that, man, I want to take what I've been through and I want to help people out of, or or even help people circumvent what I went through in my past relationships.
I think for me, it was when I started to experience healthy relationships for the first
Mm,
time. And I remember having this thought. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, Ken, but I thought to myself, where did all these great people come from? It's like they fell from the sky. Where have they been? Like
right.
I wasn't attracting them before. And then I started to have all these great, healthy relationship experiences and I was enjoying dating. And it just hit me like, wow, I've been through so much. I've had so much happen in my life. And if I can do this and have healthy relationships and enjoy dating, then I can help anybody. Like
Mm.
I like nobody is too broken for this. So then it really did become that calling and the mission on my life to just help as many people as possible.
And so you're there and you're a therapist, you're in La Jolla, California, you're living your dream life. And then all of a sudden, God puts in your heart to do a podcast, which is now
Yeah.
has over 5 million downloads. Like, walk me through that process. Cause I know you had a lot of naysayers going, no way, you can't do it. It's illegal. You're a therapist, blah, 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 blah. And you did. You went with your gut and went with what God put in your heart.
You're such a champion of people. I love your heart. I'm like, I need you to just hype me up every morning, just call you up. So yeah, I was helping people and I was seeing about 30 clients a week. And I just went, I just can't reach, the
Mm,
people that I want to reach. How can I reach them? And yeah, I told some colleagues about it who were also working kind of like next door. And I got all excited and I was showing them my Instagram and all the things. And they would say to me, this is illegal. It's like
mm,
there weren't a lot of psychologists on Instagram at this time.
mhm.
And they would say to me, oh, you can't have an Instagram account. You're crazy. And then I remember actually starting to make some money in my business, which was never something I expected. It just kind of happened as a byproduct, right? And I was telling somebody, "Oh, I'm making this amount of money." And they said, "Oh my gosh, why would you ever want to make that much money? That's crazy. Like, why are you doing this?" And I just thought like they just don't get it. They don't get the bigger picture. I want to be abundant and living my best
Mm,
life so that I can
yes.
be an example for people so that I can give to organizations and really give back. So there have definitely been times where I've felt misunderstood and people haven't gotten it,
Mhm.
but my clients and the
Yeah.
transformations I've seen and just the way I've been able to help people, it always keeps me going.
And so now here you are, 5 million downloads later. Like, that's not a
Yeah.
small number. That's insane. Like,
It's
when I
funny.
heard that the first time, I was like, did you say 5 million downloads? Like, that's
It's
crazy.
funny. I don't even think about it. And I think this is like all heart-centered people. It's like we have to like
Yeah.
actually remind ourselves of the things we've accomplished because I don't even think about it. But then
Mhm.
I'm like, oh wow, that is a lot. Like it is
Yeah.
significant. And I can tell you why it's that much. It's because every episode I say, how can I help people? I honestly just I will ask God and I will say, what do people need to hear? How can I help them? And
Mhm.
people get value out of it. And that's why it gets listened to. It's not that hard.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody who's out there, entrepreneurs, a lot of faith based entrepreneurs listen to this podcast? What would you say to somebody who's out there today, Morgan, and they're wanting to take a step? They really feel like God's put something in their heart, but everybody around them is saying, you can't do that. How are you going to do that? Why are you going to do that? What would you say to them today?
If it's on your heart, it's meant for you.
Mm,
If it is there and God placed it there, it is so meant for you. And guess what? The how is not your responsibility. And it's
mhm,
certainly not their responsibility. The how is just going to happen as you start taking action. So really just start taking messy forward
mm.
action.
Okay, talk about that right there. Talk about, because your podcast today, if after 5 million downloads, because I know mine, it did not look like my podcast did a couple of years ago. I mean, talk about that. About it's okay for it not to be perfect, and understanding it's going to be messy when you start it.
Oh yeah, just put in the reps. I'll tell you honestly, I never listened to an episode. I didn't even look at the numbers for my first year of podcasting. I never once looked at my numbers. I had the blinders on, and it was just, I'm just going to put in the reps. I'm just going to keep showing up. And I built that muscle of I'm going to do it regardless. So you have to be able to have a period where you're not really looking at outcomes and you're just
Mm-hmm.
building that muscle of doing, of showing up. And then knowing that, it's you reap what you sow, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
eventually you're planting seeds and eventually it is going to come back to you. But being able to show up regardless and just not caring about the outcomes.
Yeah. I call it
If
incremental.
I would have cared about outcomes, I would have quit. I would have quit
Yeah.
in the first 3 months.
Yeah. It's about the process. It's never about the journey or the destination, because the journey and the destination, and you said something earlier, you talked about how you've attracted different people. And I think because our hearts are very similar in that we just love to serve people. We love to help people walk through transformation, and seeing that fulfillment in our lives is it can't be touched by anything, not a comma or a zero in our bank account, or there's nothing that touches that level of fulfillment when you know you've helped somebody transform their lives. Um, for you in this process for the transformation, and you just spoke to a lot of the entrepreneurs on just go ahead and do it. Um, in the podcast specifically, before we jump into attachment styles, what's been one of the most fulfilling parts of the podcast for you?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I have met so many
Mm,
people, so
yeah.
many amazing people. I'm going to a wedding this summer of somebody who I was on her podcast and now we're friends. So I think that the relationships formed from having conversations really, really powerful. And
Mm,
then the other thing that I do on my show, which for all the entrepreneurs out there, this is a great way to get leads to your business. Okay. So listen up, is I interview my clients. I
mm,
interview my clients and I love having them on my show. And I kid you not, they'll be talking about their transformation and I get goosebumps. I get tears in my eyes because I'm listening to these people share how they've changed. So it's amazing. It attracts more people to us, but then it also fills up my cup too. So
mm.
that's one of my favorite things I do on my show.
I love that. That's absolutely amazing. So you and I are super close friends. We have been for a while now. We walked through relationship stuff together. You spoke at Create. I hosted in Atlanta, the #1 faith-based entrepreneur conference. You did an amazing job talking about attachment theory. Let's break down for everybody that's here that may not know you. Break down attachment theory, what it actually is, and what the different types are.
So, attachment theory is a roadmap to understand how you show up in relationships and why you are attracted to the people you are attracted to. And once we can understand our own unique attachment style, things really start to make sense in our relationships of why we do what we do, why we are repeating the patterns that we're repeating. So, I always tell people that understanding your attachment style is like the missing piece to the dating puzzle and relationship puzzle. Even if you're in a marriage, understanding this can dramatically improve your marriage. So it started out in the 1950s. John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth, originally researching parent-child relationships. And then later it was applied to romantic relationships, which is how I apply it in my work. But the thing that you need to know is there are four attachment styles. We have anxious, avoidant, disorganized, and secure attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want people to realize is that you likely have all of them to some degree, that you may find yourself in more than one category, but there's going to be one that is your primary way of being in a relationship. So, for example, somebody could be 75% anxious, but they have 25% secure.
Mm-hmm.
And that you mentioned the quiz at the very beginning. That's what
Yeah.
I love about my quiz is it actually breaks down the percentages. So if you go
We
take
had
that,
everybody at our conference. You put the QR code up. We had everybody at our conference do the test while you were actually when you first got up before we did our panel that day. It was the best.
oh man, you're so awesome for getting that all set up. And it really is helpful information. And I mean, after I spoke, I had people coming back to the back of the room to talk to me, and some grown men in tears
Mm.
telling me about how this is going to change their relationship. And that's how powerful it is when you really understand it. So,
So let's talk about avoidant. We'll hit avoidant, anxious, and disorganized, and then we'll jump into secure. And then I've got some questions. Some questions based off personal experience, and some questions based off of just watching relationships and reading books like The Way of the Superior Man. And I just finished the Four Agreements for the third time in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and just really learning about how I'm wired as a man. And you
mm,
mentioned it earlier about attraction, how you start attracting the right people, or you start attracting different people. So let's break down avoidant and avoidant and anxious. If you want to break those couple down for me, would
oh,
be great.
absolutely. So, with avoidant attachment, this is where we have fear of intimacy, and there's a lot of distancing behaviors that can come up. The avoidantly attached person, let's say you're going on a date with them and the date goes amazing and you had the best time and you laughed and you felt super close to this person, and then they don't text you for 7 days, right? This is an example of someone where when they get
Uh,
close, they will unconsciously pull away and distance. So they struggle with maintaining intimacy. There's
and
more I
is
could
now
say
is that
there, but
something? Is that something, Morgan, that comes from what they've learned as a child, or some childhood trauma, or the way that they were cared for by their parents? Walk us through kind of where these things come from, because as human beings, you would think that you want to be like, if you have that interaction with somebody on a date, or you spend a weekend together, something like, oh man, this is really good. I want to spend more time with you. Not, and you said subconsciously they literally will not text back or not connect back for a week or so.
mm, you always ask the best questions, Ken. You have such a
Thank you.
curious mind. I love it. So our attachment style can come from our early childhood experiences and our other adult relational
Mhm.
experiences. One theme I've noticed a lot with my clients is early romantic experiences
Mhm.
having an impact on your attachment style in your romantic relationships. I love that there's so much research being done because there's books like the book Attached with
Mhm. Mhm.
Amir Levine is his
Healy?
name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He used to say, oh, your attachment style is your attachment style. You can't change it. And it came from when you were a child. And that was like, end of story. But we know that's not true. We
Mhm.
know that your attachment style can actually change, whether it's good or bad. You could have really traumatic, relationship experiences that could cause you to have anxious attachment, even if you were secure most of your life.
Mhm.
So what we know is that yes, your early childhood experiences have a huge impact, and subsequent relationships also shape your attachment style.
So that's avoidant.
Yeah,
Talk to me about anxious attachment, and then we'll do disorganized, and then we'll talk about what each of those can do to move towards being a secure attachment and developing a secure partnership.
I love it. I get so excited about this because it's like my favorite thing ever to talk about. So, okay, anxious attachment. This is where we have a really hard time receiving reassurance, is one
Mm.
aspect. So, I always tell people it's like your reassurance bucket has holes in it. So, someone
Mm.
could say, I love you. I want to be with you. You're the best partner ever, but you're not going to be able to really accept it. And you're not feeling that calm stability in the relationship.
Mhm.
So this person is maybe they're the one sending you 17 text messages asking how your day is going. Do you still love me? They're asking for all kinds of reassurance, and they're not able to feel secure in the relationship. And at the core, what we know is it's fear of abandonment, right? Like
Mm.
fear of the relationship ending. This person's catastrophizing a lot.
Mm.
Maybe they saw you
Okay, stop right
commented.
there. Tell them, because for some people that don't, what does catastrophizing mean?
Okay, I'm going to give an example. let's say you're dating somebody and you see them on Facebook and they commented on another girl's post and they left a comment like great outfit or something. The anxiously attached person is going to say, "Oh my gosh, they're interested in this person. They're planning to leave me. This relationship's over." So catastrophizing is where your brain takes that worst case scenario and then just runs with it and just creates an alternate reality.
Okay, so here's a question right here for everybody out there who goes, "Oh my God, I do that." What do you do when that happens?
The really important thing is to realize that it's happening because
Mm,
it can be like a freight train once it gets going. So, by doing this kind of work, you want to catch that kind of thinking as quickly as you can. And then I do something with clients called reality testing. It's a cognitive behavioral intervention where you write down what are the facts? What has actually happened? What do I know to be true? So just pausing, slowing down,
mm,
checking in with reality, and then doing anything that you can to self-soothe and have compassion for that
mm,
anxious part of your brain. Maybe as a child, you had to show up that way in order to survive and to have any kind of connection. So having that love and compassion instead of judgment, and then asking yourself, what would secure me do
mm.
instead? So I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but
Yeah, I love that. So anyway, finish on anxious, and then
disorganized.
we'll jump into
Yeah.
disorganized.
So with disorganized attachment, this is a pendulum swing between avoidant and anxious. So any given moment could even be within the same day, you're showing up with anxious strategies and then you're showing up with avoidant
Mm,
strategies. And with this attachment style, it is emotionally exhausting. And if you are the person dating the person with that attachment style, you just don't know if they're in or out from one day to the next, and it
right.
makes it really hard to
Mm.
maintain a relationship.
So if you're with someone who has basically both the avoidant and the anxious, walk us through what that process looks like for someone who's dating. Because, obviously, when you date somebody at first, everything's amazing. It's awesome. And she's dressed up and he's dressed up and everything's great. And then over time, you start to realize, oh, this is not what I thought it was. Or they are disorganized. Sometimes they're avoidant and sometimes they're anxious. And I don't know if they're all in or all out. It's kind of hard for me to figure out what to do. What do you say to someone who's in a relationship with someone who has anxious and avoidant tendencies?
First off, I would have a lot of compassion for you because I know how confusing it is. And I think that it can be very emotionally draining to date someone like that. So I would have a lot of compassion. And then I think there needs to be really open, honest, direct conversations where you're giving feedback about, hey, I feel very confused in this relationship with you. Saying, I've noticed you've said this, and then I've noticed your behaviors were this. These things are not matching up. Can you help me understand where are you at? And really the question I have in that scenario is this: does that person have the emotional capacity to become securely attached while still dating you?
Mm,
And the reality, I mean, yeah, the reality is it's very hard for someone with disorganized specifically because
yeah.
disorganized is it's 5% of the population and it's a response to childhood trauma.
Mhm.
And it can be very ingrained. So it would be very hard to move to secure attachment while in a
Mhm.
relationship.
So I used to be a pretty heavy anxious attachment person. Done a lot of work over the past 2.5 years, and now it's very little. And I've learned a lot of things for me to do in specific relationships and how to create and set boundaries and those kind of things. What do you say to someone who is an anxious attachment, who is, because anxious and avoidant are drawn to each
They
other
are.
like flies to a light, or
They
like
are.
moths to a flame, like they're drawn to each other. What do you say to the person who's anxious that is dating someone who is avoidant, who may be all in 1 minute, and the next minute they're like, I need space. No. And then when you create space, they're wanting you back in their life. What does that look like for somebody who might be or might have an anxious attachment?
Ooh, we could be here for 4 hours, but I'll give you a couple things. I'll give you some gems on this. I think the number one thing I would say is you have to become aware when you are giving away your energy to the
Mm,
relationship, when instead you should be giving your energy to yourself. Because with anxious attachment, you're very good at being highly attuned and focusing on your
mm,
partner and giving the relationship all of your energy. So, one of the best things you can do is learn to recognize when you're doing that and intentionally give your energy back to yourself. So, this looks like go spend time with your friends, go spend time with your family, do your daily non negotiable
mm.
routines, fill up your cup first.
Yeah.
So start giving your energy back to yourself. And then honestly, one of the best things you can do is learn how to self-soothe. Because with anxious attachment, a lot of times we're looking for someone else to soothe our emotions. So we're outsourcing
Mm.
our
It's
soothing.
good. It's good.
And that really disempowers us.
Hmm. And
You
so
know, you
what are
need
the things they can do to self-soothe? Like what are some of the exercises or modalities they can use to be able to do that?
I'm curious what you do, Ken. What would be what are your I'm like
I
picture
mean,
you like, I
yeah.
don't know, with like a sledgehammer or something.
I love to go to the gym.
Okay,
So I mean,
yes.
there's been times like I would say over the past couple years when I get hit hard with something, I literally will walk downstairs, I'll make a pre-workout, and I will go get on my Peloton for at least 30 minutes. Or I
Yes.
will get on my Peloton and I'll go to Planet Fitness and I'll lift because I want to sweat. I
Yep.
want to take my mind off of
Go
it. I
change
want
your
to,
state.
exactly right. As Tony Robbins talks all the time
Yep.
about changing state. For me too, I've got a big Bluetooth speaker. You've heard me say this before. By my Peloton, I crank it, and I do country
Yes.
music rides, and I'm just singing, and I'm going, and I just totally shut off that side. So that is something in the past that I've done. And I think the more that you do this, and I know I'm interviewing you, you're not interviewing me, but I think the more that I've done, the more that I've done that, and I've learned to lean into, okay, I know this is the way I'm wired. I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of healing. I'm not necessarily an anxious attachment, just barely now. Man, this is okay for me to be able to do this because I think a
Mhm.
lot of times when you talked about the emotions and I would so I'm gonna ask you this question. We can answer this in just a second. I would think that the people that are like you and I, who are people, who love to help people, who love to serve people, who love to give, I would think the majority of those people would be anxious attachment. Is
It's a
that
really
correct?
it's a very interesting observation, and I can tell you that yes, there's a high correlation between people who are in helping professions. Even think about
Mm,
nurses,
hmm.
doctors,
Hmm.
people who are helping people. There's a high correlation with anxious attachment style. Absolutely.
So soothing. I know for me, it's I want to work out.
Yeah.
I want to sweat. I want to move my body, change my state, as Tony Robbins would say. What are some other things that you've seen, or some of the other things that you teach your clients to be able to do?
Well, you gave a great example here, and I want to point something out. You know what it is.
Yeah,
Few people
yeah.
actually know what it is. So
Mm-hmm.
even more important than me giving you some examples, what I want you to do, everybody, is to come up with what that plan is.
Mm,
And you have to be willing to experiment. So for some people, it might be journaling, it might be the gym, it might be a hot bath, it might be blasting the music, driving down a dirt road, whatever it is. Know what your things are, have them ready to go in advance.
mm,
I think about it like the fire drills. Okay, where's the escape
mm-hmm,
path? You have
mm-hmm,
to know what are the things you're going to do to self-soothe and be aware of them before you need them and
That's so good.
be willing to spend time getting curious about it. Try different things out and see what works for you.
So for me, in this whole process of learning about attachment styles, and this was even probably about halfway through kind of my healing journey over the past 2.5 to 3 years, learning about this is, excuse me, as an entrepreneur, I don't have time to work. I don't have time for a process. Like I got stuff I want to do. I'm 55 years old. I want to be in a relationship. This is what I want. I want to do this in my business. I want to do this in my faith. I want my health to look like this. Like I'm boom, 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 boom. Okay, let's go get it done. What do you say? Because there's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast that are like, man, I have some anxious tendencies. What do you say to them about being comfortable with the process and just seeing that through?
We have a mutual friend, Ken, and I remember having this conversation with her
Mm-hmm.
and realizing, kind of the same thing of like she's ready for a relationship. She wants it to happen now. And and I was able to say, "Hey, like give me 12 weeks, okay?" And then the other thing I need you to be willing to do is to create space and time for this and to acknowledge that it's probably going to be pretty painful.
Mm,
And it's that whole awareness of would you rather have a lifetime of suffering
yeah.
where you're not
So
not
good.
getting what you
Yeah.
want, or are you willing to go through some temporary pain?
Yeah.
And once I can get people's buy-in to that, I know
Mm,
that they're going to be okay. And if you can say, "Hey, you need to schedule your healing time
yeah.
just like you would schedule a meeting with a potential client.
Well,
Like
it's
this
it's
needs."
not any different. Your mental health and your emotional health, it's not any different than the gym. I mean, I've lost 85 pounds. I mean, I
Yeah.
know what it takes. I mean, I this morning in the gym, I PR'd on my chest press, my incline chest press today. I was so freaking pumped. I sent it to my group of guys, Brian Covey and Vic Keller and Gary Brecka and Randy Garn and Brent Gove. I sent him a picture and I was like, come get you some, fellas. Like I was fired up, man, at the gym. I took a picture. I'm like, y'all come get you some.
Yeah,
And
you make space for it. You prioritize it.
you have to make space for this. I, I it's funny because when we were at Create this year with all the people that were there, it was funny. Some of the people are like, I've never heard this before. I don't even know what this is. This hasn't been something that this information is not something I've been
Um,
privy to in the past. Um, so if they're in that position and they're just hearing about this for the first time, what do they need to do? Obviously your quiz, we'll put this in the show notes and we'll
Yes.
drop it in all the channels. So for them to go check be able to do it's 2 minutes, 2 minute quiz,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yep.
We'll drop that in there for them to be able to check that out. Where do they start? Like what's a great starting point for them?
I think it's this awareness. I was actually thinking about this today, and I really wish this was something that everyone knew, which is that we have to have so much compassion and love
Mm,
for ourselves and in realizing that maybe you've been in a lot of unhealthy relationships. Maybe you've been through divorce or you've had toxic experiences, no matter what it is, okay? I would want you to forgive yourself for
mm,
that and to realize that you were so impacted by your relational experiences that you've had, and so many of them were out of your control, especially your parents, right?
yeah.
And that wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault that you developed an anxious attachment style or avoidant attachment style or disorganized. None of that was your fault.
Yeah.
And we want to have so much compassion for you and just so much love. And if you could talk to that 5-year-old kid version of you that was going through that relational trauma, like what would you want them to know? You
Mm,
you would you would want them to know, hey, you're so worthy of love. You're so
mhm.
worthy of relationships that feel good. And even though it's not your fault it happened, now it's your
Ability.
responsibility
Yeah.
to decide as a healthy adult, no more of this BS.
Mm.
I am having healthy, secure relationships that add value to my life because I'm deserving of it. And I'm going to do whatever work I have to do to get there.
So what would you say to someone who's because the anxious and attack and avoidant, they're drawn to each other. What would you say to a couple that's one's anxious and one's avoidant,
Mm.
and they're concerned about the long term? because long term, if you're anxious and attachment, it's unhealthy. But
Yeah.
what should the goal be if you're in? Because everybody that's listening to this podcast, you're going to be a percentage of each. One's going to be a percentage of one. One's
Right.
going to be a percentage of the other. What's the goal? What's the process for them to be able to move into secure attachment?
I think I would give them lots of hope, and I would want them to know that no matter what your relationship has been, you can co-create
Mm,
secure attachment. And I use that word
mm,
co-create. If one of you decides to show up secure and the other one doesn't, that's not, I mean, it could help a little bit, but it's really going to take both people deciding, I want to learn how to show up securely attached as an individual, and I want to learn how to co-create it with my
mm,
partner as well. So it's really that commitment of, this is a priority. Let's do the
mhm,
healing work we need to. And honestly, I think it's I think it's easier than people think it is,
mm,
honestly. Like when we can, with couples, when you can get to some of those core woundings, because it's
mm.
not about the dishes. It's not about
Right.
who's doing the dishes, right? We know that.
Right.
Like,
Right.
but when we can get to the core woundings and really work through those, we can actually create secure attachment with people pretty quickly. So yeah, I would just give them a lot of hope and know that it's always possible to have a healthy relationship. And
Yeah.
specifically for my entrepreneurs who are listening, what I see a lot is you get two avoidantly attached people who are
Oh, wow.
together
Yeah.
because they're like, we're both entrepreneurs and we're focusing on our business and we're so independent. And then what do you have? You have a very lonely
Mm,
relationship that looks
mm.
really successful and not a lot of intimacy.
Oh, you said something that's very good right there. It looks very successful. From the outside, they look and go, wow, look at her. She's this. And look at him. He's this. And man, I bet they're just having the greatest time ever. But on the inside, inside you said it, it's super lonely.
Lonely.
So really, with everything that I've learned and what I'm hearing you saying here, it's almost better for the anxious and the avoidant to be together and to be able to learn how to move and co-create into a secure relationship.
Absolutely. And obviously I always think of it as a spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm,
If there's somebody who has some secure attachment and they've done some work on themselves, that's going to help their relationship.
mm-hmm,
So if we've got, somebody who's at like 25% anxious and 75% secure, and then we've got a 50% avoidant and
mm-hmm.
50% secure, like ultimately, the more secure, the easier it's going to
Right.
be. However, it's not impossible. If we have two people who say, well, hey, I know I'm this and I know that I'm this, and they both decide, I want to move to secure attachment and I want to create a relationship that feels good to both of us,
Mm-hmm.
you can absolutely do it. I've seen it so many times.
What would you say to someone who's in a relationship and they're the one that's putting forth the effort, and the other
Mm,
person in the relationship, the other partner says, I want to, but then the effort, because one of the things that I read and I put on my social media the last couple of months is behavior is greater than words.
mhm.
What would you say to someone who is in a relationship and the partner, and I would say probably used the word earlier, doesn't have the capacity to show up? What does that conversation look like?
Well, this is one of my favorite sayings I talk about with my community. You can't water plastic plants.
Mm,
If something doesn't have capacity to grow, you can't give your energy to it. So, at a certain point, if you have exhausted yourself, if you have had couples therapy, I mean, if you are really working and showing up and the other person is still not growing, you do have to ask yourself, at what point am I watering a plastic plant? Am I giving my energy to something that simply cannot grow? Not because it's bad, but because it doesn't have capacity to. I think that's a really, really important question. I will say, though, I think a lot of us are scared of being vulnerable. We are scared of being the ones to model the
mm,
work and to invest, and we give up too quickly.
mm,
So, on the other hand, I would say make sure that you are modeling and you're learning how to show up secure and your partner will learn from you over time.
Right. I absolutely love that.
So if they're growing, even if it's small, if they're
Right.
growing,
Right.
keep watering it.
Right. I love that. You can't water plastic plants.
No.
That will be on my social media today and tomorrow. I promise you that, because that is really, really, really good. What would you say to someone who's in that situation and they've been watering plastic plants? What would you say to them as far as extending grace to the
Mm.
person that just doesn't have the capacity?
That's why I love that metaphor so much because it's not like, you don't go like, oh, what a terrible plant or something. You just go,
Mm-hmm.
well, yeah, of course it can't grow. It's a
Mm-hmm.
plastic one. And I think where some people are on their healing journeys, they just don't have capacity to grow yet, right? Maybe they will in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But I think being able to know that that has nothing to do with you or your
Mm-hmm.
worthiness. It's not about you. If we have real compassion and love for them, we understand that where they are, they can't meet us where we are at. And it's actually hurtful to
Mm-hmm.
try to keep expecting them to because they're simply not able to. So when we really love them and care for them, we give them that grace and we say, I hope that you go on and you find the kind of relationship that works for you or that you find the kind of healing that feels good for you as well.
I love that. I always really what I've learned in this 55-year journey, right? As a, you know, 55-year-old man, I've learned, especially in being single for the last 4 years, is the more I focus on me and how I feel, the less I can focus on the person that's in my life at the time and give grace. If I get offended or if I feel hurt or if I feel wounded, it robs my ability to be able to extend grace and to be able to either bring healing to the relationship or even to bring healing to the person I was in a relationship as I exit that relationship to move forward into a different season that God has for me.
Yeah. And you've heard this saying, rejection is redirection.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing that if it's not meant for us, it's just because there's something else that really
Mm-hmm.
is meant for us. And you don't want to
Yeah.
block your love doorway, right? Like you want that space actually in your life to be empty
Mm.
so that the right person can come in. You don't want to be blocking what's meant for you. And this is such a God thing, isn't it? Of getting to that place of
Yeah.
grace and
Yeah.
surrender.
It's hard.
And
It's
it's
this
hard.
isn't it's not easy. This is hard because you and I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I see this around, and even in my own heart sometimes in the past when you get hurt or somebody can't show up or the capacity's not there and they're in or out or something happens. What happens in our own heart is we want to villainize them like, oh, they're bad and they shouldn't have done this. They hurt me, which is where I stopped. I stopped and went, whoa, hang on a minute. I'm making this about my offense. I'm making this about the way that they've hurt me or the way they haven't done A, B, C, or D for me, or they haven't showed up the way I've showed up for them. And really went, oh man, I can't be the man God wants me to be with that attitude. I have to be God, I pray for her. And I just pray, God, I pray your grace on her. And I pray, God, you do in her heart what you need to do. And really I think you can exit gracefully in
Yes.
relationships, but it is not easy. And
It's a
you're in,
process.
yeah.
It's a process. You have to get to that place of forgiveness, not only of that person, but
Yeah.
forgiveness of yourself. Because a lot of times that's what we're really mad about
Mm-hmm.
is we go, oh my gosh, I should have known better. And we get
Mm.
so mad at ourselves. So if we haven't forgiven ourselves, then we're going to really struggle with forgiving the other person as well. But
Mm.
I go back to that. I have this thing I talk about return on energy
Mm.
investment, ROIE. I always think about. And if you're holding on to all kinds of anger, hurt towards somebody from the past, that is not a good use of your energy.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
love
not
that.
going to get you what you want.
Yeah. And it doesn't help our heart and it doesn't prepare our heart or our energy for the person that God's like, I want to send you. but I
Yeah.
can't send you because your energy and your anger, and you're still holding on and harboring, resentment and anger towards somebody who's hurt you. Did they hurt you? Probably. But
Yep.
there's nothing you can do holding on to that past relationship because of the hurt. One of the things that I've learned in the past several years, and I'm sure that I've been in relationships where I've done wrong, and the other person has had to go, man, I'm just going to have grace. I'm just going to offer grace. I'm just going to look at it and go, I'm just going to have some empathy. I'm just
Empathy.
going to develop a heart of empathy for that individual. And I'll never forget at Create this year. I don't know if you spoke first or Henry and Taryn spoke first.
Henry and Taryn. Yep.
They spoke and then you came up after them. But I remember in their talk, because they're like this perfect couple, right? But I remember Taryn, and they told me this when I first met them a year and a half ago, was Taryn always says, if I would have met Henry 8 months earlier, I would have messed it up.
Yep.
I would not have been ready. And boy, when I think about that, I'm like, wow, God, you're moving. And I love Proverbs. It says a man who finds a wife finds a good thing. And that scripture is literally, I used to teach this in my courtship series as a youth pastor. We did a 6-week series called God, Will You Go With Me? So, back when you were 12, you're like, hey, mom, I'm going so-and-so. Where y'all going? Like they would make fun of you and you'd laugh and you'd be on the phone all night long with you're not this old, but the 30-foot cord going in to the kitchen, to the living room. And your sister's like, Ken's been on the phone 10 minutes. You're doing that. And I would do this series every year, and it would be based off of this scripture. A man who finds a wife finds a good thing. And that scripture in Proverbs literally is, as a man is on his path towards God, he's passionate for God. He's chasing Jesus. He wants to fulfill the destiny and purpose God's put in his life. God causes the path of a woman to intersect his path.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to say this, I used to say this all the time in this series is, don't worry about finding Mr. or Mrs. Right. Worry about becoming Mr. or Mrs. Right.
It's so true. And that's the same with my relationship, my fiance now.
I was gonna like drop that at the very end, and you
Oh,
did it.
dang it.
Anyway, go ahead and tell everybody, because I was gonna say that was my very last thing I was gonna talk about.
Oh my gosh, I love it. But it's the same for me that if I had met
Yeah.
him, if I had met him even, a year earlier, 6 months earlier, I would not have been ready. And I know that God is in that. And that's where that surrender comes
Yeah.
from, is that trust of, okay,
Mhm.
you're going to become that version of you, and God is going to place that person in your life who can create the kind of relationship that you deserve and that you're worthy of, and you will become the person who can also hold up their end of that too. So I think it's so true. We can't get upset in our
Mm.
relationship, quote unquote, failures. It's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
part of a much bigger plan.
100%. It doesn't hurt for you to have a big brother named Ken who gets up on stage and gets onto your guy for not proposing to you yet in front of all those people at the conference. And he's like, holy cow. I think we sped the process up maybe a little bit for you.
You know what's so funny about this is, so we've been together for 3 years, and this is the best relationship I've ever been in, right? Hopefully. And he's just an incredible person. And it was the first time in my life that I didn't feel the timeline pressure. I didn't
Wow.
feel that, like, oh, we have to get engaged in order for me to feel secure. We had
Mm.
already created secure attachment. And then for him, it was all about lining some things up in his career. And
Yeah.
as soon as he was ready, like the day he was ready, he went to the store and did it.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that about him.
So I know a little bit about your journey in that. And it's not been an easy journey. Even though you guys have gotten to the point of being in a secure partnership, it still isn't always easy.
No,
Can you speak to that?
secure is not perfect. I think sometimes we confuse the
Mm-hmm.
two, but with a securely attached relationship, we repair a lot more easily, and we grow through conflict. We learn how to grow through conflict. We're on the same team. So even if things come up, we're able to navigate things well. And I think it's just so important to realize that, of course, there's going to be things that come up. There's going to be moments of doubt or conflict, but it's all about how do you respond to it,
Mm.
not react. How do you both intentionally respond to it? And then over time, it just becomes this unshakable, secure attachment.
I love that. I love that. Well, I'm super excited for you, girl.
Thank you.
Engaged. I can't wait for the wedding. It's going to be amazing. Tell everybody, where's the best place to connect with you, Dr. Morgan?
So my podcast, Let's Get Vulnerable, 2 episodes a week. If you want to learn more about attachment theory, that is the place.
Yeah.
And then I'm also on Instagram at Dr. Morgan Coaching. And we'll put the quiz in the show notes. Make sure you go take the quiz. And then I also have a book, Love Magnet, Get Off the Dating Roller Coaster and Attract the Love You Deserve. So if you're a book person, you'll probably really, really enjoy that too.
Yeah, and I send people to Morgan all the time, by the way. I'm like, listen, you need to go get connected with her and walk, and not people I'm dating, just people I know that are in that kind of in that space. Cause I think it's just, again, emotional health, relational health, physical health, like those things are super important for us to be able to become in our core five, we call it faith, finance, or faith, health, relationship, business, and finances, to be able to become the best version of ourselves in our core five so that we can experience everything that God has for us. Listen, honored, but I'm grateful for your friendship, my friend.
I'm grateful for you and the way you serve your community and just knowing your heart and how you
Yeah,
genuinely care about every single person that you come into contact with. Like I'm just blown away by who you are as a person.
I
So thank you
appreciate that, girl.
so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Guys, thank you for joining us on another episode of As the Leader Grows. I am your host, Ken Jocelyn. Again, Dr. Morgan Anderson. Go follow her on Instagram. Hit her podcast up, over 5 million downloads. Guys, I don't care where you're at in the relationship game. If you're not in a relationship, you're single, you're in a relationship, or you're married or living with your partner, listen, go find what she's teaching. I promise you, it will make a difference. Help you move into secure attachment.